It's the Queen City Music Podcast, the podcast devoted to the local music scene in Charlotte, North Carolina. Here's your host, Matthew Ablan.
Hello and welcome to episode 71 of the Queen City Music Podcast. This episode of the Queen City Music Podcast is sponsored by Midwood Guitar Studio, Charlotte, North Carolina's own boutique guitar shop located in Plaza Midwood. Midwood Guitar Studio not only has the finest selection in boutique guitars, but familiar names like Fender, Martin, Taylor, Two Rock, and many others. Whether it's a guitar, bass, amp, effects pedal, or a much-needed accessory, the knowledgeable and friendly staff at Midwood Guitar Studio will help guide you in the right direction for your next purchase. Also, they now have a luthier on staff for all your repair needs. Visit their website at midwoodguitarstudio.com or stop in to see their unique shop at 1517 Central Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina. This month on episode 71 of the QCMP, I'm speaking with John Bureau from Earshot. Earshot is a new online platform that musicians can use to help promote their shows. However, it's a little bit more than that, but let's let John fill us in. John Bureau from Earshot, welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.
Great to have you. Thanks for coming out on this chilly Sunday.
It's been cold a lot recently, so different for Charlotte.
Oh, God. I was playing over the weekend, and it was just crazy cold.
Yeah.
It was just yesterday?
Yeah.
Ooh.
The wind chill, I know.
Man.
It was piercing through every layer that I had, so.
I hope it ends soon.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, maybe I'm a masochist. I do love a little bit of winter. Growing up here in Charlotte, I just, we really haven't had great winters. We don't get snows anymore, so I do enjoy when it does snow down here, and again, it doesn't happen. But when it's cold, I do like my four seasons, so we'll see. I think I could take a couple months before it starts warming back up.
Well, Charlotte, spring is like a week long, and then it's right into summer. So
right.
That's the way we live.
I know. It's horrible.
All right, so let's get things underway, man. Are you originally from the Charlotte area?
Yes. So I was born and raised here in Charlotte. Grew up on one road for, a year and a half, and then have stayed. My mom is still in that same house since I was about 2.5.
Wow.
So in the South Charlotte area, just right outside of Matthews.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a little break after high school. I went to college, University of South Carolina, go Gamecocks.
Nice. And
I was down there for 4 years. Took a job for another 2 years at Target Distribution, process improvement, super amazing experience. Taught me a lot about being an adult in the real world. A warehouse environment is, a little rough and tumble, and no one's really the tact isn't there. So you learn to get a little thick skin.
Yeah.
But after that, I realized I just want to come back home. I know that Columbia is only an hour and a half away. Right. But Charlotte's always been home for me. So. Yeah, I grew up here. I love this town. I always joke I'm going to die here, hopefully timely, in 70 years or so. But I just love it. Yeah.
So I want to dive into Earshot a little bit with you. First off, before I even continue on, do you have any music background?
Yeah, I do. So, besides obviously just singing throughout the house, my mom is a huge Sound of Music fan.
Yeah.
So, and growing up with Disney, you just hear music all the time. But when I went to high school, I'd had an elective that kind of fell through for some reason in the first week. I don't know if they canceled the class or the teacher wasn't there anymore.
Right.
So me and my buddy were in the same situation. And we're in the administrative office, and his sister walks in, who is a year older. We're trying to pick our elective. Maybe we'll do some extra gym class or something. Yeah. And she said, "Hey, you and Tommy, my buddy, her brother, you guys should join chorus." And I never thought about it.
Right.
I was just saying in the car, in the shower.
That's where all the girls are. That's where you need to be. That was my big mistake when I was younger.
Right, exactly. Well, and what was great was that freshman year, she was in that class, and I was like, oh, got to plug in with her friends. That's great. We're freshmen. Like, we should go in there and meet some older class folks, at least. Yeah. So we both signed up. I didn't realize how much I'd enjoy it. So I did that for a year. Then I moved up to the men's ensemble, got a couple solos throughout high school, and I was like, man, I love singing. It's really great. I was baritone. Had some fun parts. And then when I went down to South Carolina, my buddy and I auditioned for the a cappella group.
Right.
And I cowered it out, before I actually auditioned. So I ended up going back. I don't know what was in my head that day. I just wasn't feeling very confident.
Yeah.
My buddy was always a better singer, also sang in high school with me. So I came back the next semester and I joined that. So I was in an a cappella group for all of college effectively. Was their treasurer for a semester. I loved it so much I became the president. It was originally Soundcheck. We kind of rebranded to the Carolina Gentlemen, really a branding thing for that area. Wore some, garnet seersucker pants and a bow tie. It really
nice.
It fit really nice.
Hey, man, it's classic.
That's
the kind of thing you got to do.
We needed an identity, I think, to kind of fit with the school. And again, Soundcheck was phenomenal. All the guys are great. They are really music people. So we believe Carolina Gents kind of just took that, to the next step where we can now market throughout the entire school. Still operating to this day. Mind you, I'm 30, so I've been out of college for a while, but so they're succeeding. So I did that for 4 years. And once I graduated, I took that Target job and I worked on the weekends. That's kind of the warehouse schedule. You have these weird hours and days, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had something like that.
Yeah, I've done some warehouse stuff. I've done restaurant stuff. I've done a lot.
Right. So in those alternate kind of businesses, just outside of the 9 to 5, however your work is structured, you might have a lot extra free time. So I worked Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Now that's kind of a killer. Having just graduated, I'm a young adult. I finally have an income. Yeah. Let me go out and party with my friends. Oh, I can't travel on the weekends. Right. So my thought was, I got all this free time on the weekdays. Of course, I'll still party with some of my, college friends that are maybe, 1 year younger. But I also want to learn, while I have this extra time, I now have, 4 days off. I want to learn how to play guitar. I want to learn how to play the piano.
Sure.
So I got a keyboard, and I got an acoustic guitar. And I realized very quickly, I simply I can't play an instrument. I really can't. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's I can't translate, what I want to do with the dexterity of my fingers. Yeah. I can't reach necessarily kind of all the areas on the fret that I need to. So yeah. It never really worked out that way. I haven't been able to find a way to connect back into making any music. I don't know if there's like an a cappella group for adults, but again, I'm sure
choirs all over the town,
right?
Stuff. Yeah, there's got to be something.
So, but with that, I think I've kind of I get my music fix by going out and doing karaoke, still singing in the car, right? But Earshot is now where I funnel my music passion. So
okay, well, first off, before we really dig into Earshot, what is Earshot?
Earshot is a technology.
Yeah.
It's an online platform that is advancing local events.
Okay.
And local's the big thing. It's really focused on community, what's happening around you in the community, who are the creators, including musicians, the food trucks, and I know we'll talk more about kind of what all that encompasses. Yeah. But Earshot is really a community-based platform for what events are kind of going on around you. Don't get me wrong. My wife and I travel often to, we're going to a festival in Lexington, Kentucky. We might travel for a concert. I saw the Paper Kites, one of my favorite bands, out in Durham, and that's great to support, those big name brands. Right. But man, is it great to show up to a place you may not have known that there was going to be live music and listen to some local music, support some local talent, support, your local brewery, bar, restaurant. And Earshot really aims to be the platform to facilitate more and quality kind of local events.
So how did this idea come about?
So I'm a problem solver at heart. That's kind of how I've always been. I look at everything, if there is a problem, as something to be solved for, whether that is solving something in my family's life or my own life. Maybe it's planning an event or organizing something. I do look at everything through a lens of, solving a problem. I'm actually a process consultant by trade. I went to school for process consulting, and I've done that in my career since.
All right, freeze. I have no idea what that even is.
Yeah, okay.
Describe what a process consultant is.
For sure. And if there's any jargon I use, feel free to stop me.
I will.
Perfect. We can talk about it. So a process consultant is looking at a process that's in front of you. And that might be manufacturing a good, that might be delivering a service, it might be something in a back office process.
Right.
Everything is a process.
Okay.
To take inputs and to be able to effectively transform those and create outputs. Right. So there's a process for this podcast where you do set up, you connect with different creators that you want to talk to, and you may send them some prep or some ideas, then you engage beforehand. There's a process in order for this podcast to actually be delivered to the customer, the consumer. So a process consultant uses a variety of technology and techniques to understand, are there any kinks in the process, any opportunities to streamline these things, to make it easier on the folks in the process or the recipient receiving the goods to have kind of better quality on both ends.
Yeah.
So that's what I've done for my career.
Okay.
And so I look through the lens of problem solving and really looking at a process, right?
All right.
So going back to the question of kind of how does the earshot concept start, I'm a very social guy. I have a ton of different friends from really different levels of my life, whether I still know guys that I grew up with from third grade, folks that have moved in through high school, folks that I met in college and have now moved through Charlotte or again or remote. So I'm really huge on connecting with people.
Yeah.
And when I do that, I want to be face-to-face. I want to go out and do an activity or really enjoy that person's presence. Maybe there's something going on in the background. And one of the best ways to do that, especially in the Charlotte scene, in the past 10 years, are breweries like that. Right out of college, and after my first job, I now have some money to be able to go out and have a few beers, and then Uber home and bring all my friends out, have a good time. But being able to figure out kind of what's going on in those locations was incredibly tedious, and frankly, still kind of is to this day. So, I want to get my friends together in a couple weeks. We have a buddy coming in from out of town. I know that he loves some funky kind of music. Let me figure out where some music's playing, because I'm sure he wants to hear what Charlotte has to offer and really have a good, fun vibe while we're, hanging out and getting our night started. But the current mediums for finding that are very tedious. Take Instagram, for example. You have to already follow all of those important accounts, whether it's the breweries or you have to know musicians and have to follow their profile.
Right.
You don't have to feed through what you already have in your personal life. I follow my aunt and my uncle and my, cousins and all that stuff. You don't have to sift through all of that to make plans, right? So that's tedious. And again, you have to follow them in the first place in order to find that information. And then to cross-reference what's going on between all these different posts and all these different accounts is incredibly tedious.
Right.
So, I was maybe in aggregate taking an hour to plan one Friday night based on finding some music and then finding where a food truck might be so that we can eat while we're having some beers. And I realized that's a problem to be solved, at least on my end, like as a community member.
Right.
Wanting to enjoy those things, wanting to support local businesses, local talent, that there is a search problem for figuring out what's going on.
It's a growing city with a lot going on. How do I know what to do?
Exactly. And I want it all at my fingertips. Like I want to be out there. Right. Analysis paralysis is certainly a thing where if you have too many inputs that you really can't discern between them, you have 100 different options. That is very hard to suss out, well, which one's best for me. You're probably throwing a dart at the board and saying, I'll just go with this one. Or, a lot of folks will get overwhelmed by the choices without an ability to kind of filter that down and see what all their options are. So, certainly a problem to be solved on the back end, or on the front end, I should say, for the community. So I started thinking about that selfishly, of course, because I want to be able to go out. And then my background as a process consultant kicked in, and I thought, well, what would it take in order to have all of that information, all the events, where it's going to be hosted, who's going to be providing that? What would it take to get that to the end user like me, to the community? And I realized, there's a very complex process that I need to discover, that I would need to understand, that probably is very manual and tedious for the folks that are creating events, for me to discover. to see if there's something there.
Right.
So that's really how it started. And I went down that path of really just talking to a bunch of folks to really understand kind of what's at play here, what's on the table, how does this whole thing work? There's a ton of variety. That's helpful with solving a problem. Yeah, so that's kind of how it started.
So when you started Earshot, I came across it on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Some other musicians were using it, and I was like, well, okay, let's see what this is all about. And I really liked what you guys were doing, so I signed up for it to help promote. Is it just a platform for musicians, or was that the intent when you started, or is that how you're starting it? Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. So that was the initial idea of really focused on music. I know that I mentioned earlier with food trucks, that kind of really came later, and all the other stuff that's at play here. It really did start with music. Again, because that's a huge passion of mine growing up. Whether it's formal or not, I'd never been in a band before, right? But with the music background, very passionate about hanging out with folks in a great environment and with music. I listen to music all the time. So, on my earbuds. So it started with music, and that was something that I could really ground to and be passionate about up front rather than trying to, take the whole thing on at once. It started with music. So when we had enough going for us, and when I say we, I'm talking about my business partner, Chris Gibson. Amazing guy, love him to death. Have known him for several years, a groomsman in his upcoming wedding. I cannot wait to celebrate him in Chelsea. So that's my business partner.
Okay.
So when we were originally talking about the idea, it really was just music, because he's passionate about music too, plays some guitar, has several musician friends. Now it doesn't stop there, clearly, kind of as we've alluded to, where, when folks in the community are looking for something, maybe it's not just, hey, I want to know what music's playing and I want to see where jazz is. I also need to eat, and I know that this coffee shop just serves coffee. I need a food truck. I need to kind of cross-reference all these things. Maybe, on a Wednesday, I want to get the guys together and we want to go play trivia and just have fun. So there's a lot more at play, but it really did start with music and musicians. That's kind of where we got our base. Okay. We did a ton of following of musicians and outreach, whether it was, we roll up to a place and we see musicians playing, and during their break or after their show, we would talk to them and get their ideas. Hey, is this really a problem for you? Give us literally all the feedback you can to consider. And then we've, branched out.
How open were the people that you talked to?
Oh, man.
Or are they guarded about it?
No.
They're like, hey, man, is this some kind of scam? What are you talking about?
No, they were completely open about it. I think that's based on the approach, though. Like, I was just approaching them as, like, someone in the community. I didn't even really, in those initial conversations, kind of pitch the idea at all, or even till the end of our conversation.
Right.
It was really just trying to understand who they are, and I'm someone in the community. So I think that approach helped. That it wasn't, I'm trying to be sold in the middle of my set and I'm kind of focused on something else. It's, hey, this guy's like interested in music and interested in me and wants to know, kind of what am I dealing with?
Right.
Yeah. So I do think that helped a lot. And then if we then said, okay, all those, issues, obstacles, circumstances that you deal with, we're trying to solve for that. Is that something that you would be interested in as a technology to streamline this stuff? And overwhelmingly, yes. Okay. They're like, man, a lot of the responses was, I'm here to play music. It's my passion. It's what I pour my life into. All these processes that allow me to get here on this stage kind of just comes with the business and can be tedious and frustrating and something I don't want to deal with. If you can streamline those, make it easier, then man, that would be so much better, and to connect with kind of the community better. So
before you're getting into even developing anything, you're trying to get feedback from musicians and figure out what they need, because you're a process guy. And you're like, what is this even about? What is this? I've got this idea, but I don't know what other people need.
Yes.
So let me get a list of this, and how am I going to put this together?
Exactly. No, that's right.
And what's the tech side like for that? I mean, your background's in process. Is your partner, is he the tech guy? Who's developing, how do you develop an app? I'm always curious about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that there are multiple ways to do it. And, between me and Chris, we're just two guys, and we have full-time jobs. He is in that tech space with tech solutions and that background of being able to kind of ramp up different feature releases for different technology.
Right.
And again, I'm process. So in the early stages, it really was this just seamless, conjunction between what each of us do and kind of how we look at these different lenses to be able to pull together like, hey, here's the process issue. Here is how technology could potentially streamline and solve it. Is that technology possible? And he would kind of think through his background and do some research, and he'd be able to say, yeah, this is a workflow that could be implemented in whatever, area we kind of build this up in. Right. So he was in charge, along with several other tasks. He was in charge of kind of figuring out how would we build this. None of us have built an app before. Now, I will say his background was actually pretty great. He had been involved in a startup before that was technology driven. It was kind of an events on college campus kind of startup. Right. So, and that is honestly, when I had the idea, I reached out to him initially, besides just our friendship and his intellect and the way that we can work together and communicate very open and honestly, he had kind of a background with startups before. So, so he had that experience in building that one up, and his charge was, okay, you've built it kind of from a grounds up kind of web platform, which cost, there were costs with that had sure. been really invested there. And I said, look, I got a lot going on here in Charlotte. I'm honestly trying to buy a house here, right? So I don't necessarily have a ton of funds to sink into this. Is there a way that we can build this that is very low profile, but it is still robust enough to kind of manage what we're trying to do? And he found a platform builder that we've used, and there are a variety of them on the market, especially now. Where we started, there are now, probably 5 other competitors that you can work with as well. But the way a platform builder works is it's basically they call it low code, no code. Okay. And what that means is where you used to have to build into the back end of a website or a platform or an application, you would have to have all of this code in this very specific, complex, written in a specific, complex way to kind of chain all this together to do these what might seem as simple actions, but very complex code. And what a platform builder does is it says, all right, we're going to standardize what a certain workflow looks like, transferring, some information from a text field into a table. And we're going to handle the code on the back end, but we're going to make an interface for someone to be able to build it. And it's basically a plug and play. If you think of Legos. Right. You might have different colored Legos or different shapes, and the Legos are already pre-built. You may say, I need a button that is going to workflow information from one place to another, or I need a tab that's going to, when I click on it, show someone's profile. And the platform builder allows you to chain all that stuff together in a really cool way without you having to learn all this complex code. So that's effectively how Earshot was kind of built up in that environment. So that is one way you can build it. Now, if you have a ton of funds, you can build it in your own environment from the ground up. It's incredibly tedious. You got to have a ton of resources to do that. And honestly, we had several vetting conversations of what is this going to look like? What obstacles are we going to try and find? But we're such doers and incremental improvers kind of in our job that we're like, let's put something together, again, that is cohesive. It has a vision, and we can, increment along the way with small improvements. But let's at least just get this going so that when we talk to folks, we have something to show them and be able to get visual feedback on rather than selling the concept. And then 5 years later, we have, we built something complex and now the environment's different. Yeah.
And how long was from inception to launch did Earshot take you?
So I was looking at this the other day, and this is maybe an embarrassing story, but I looked at the initial PowerPoint presentation that I put together for Earshot and the concept. Yeah. And I love my family. We're very tight-knit. We all still live here in Charlotte. So they've heard my crazy ideas of businesses or something I'm going to do in my personal life. I always share with them and kind of vet it out. They'll be very honest with me. Sometimes they'll be cheerleaders when they need to be critics, which is great. So I built this initial PowerPoint. It had been stewing in my mind for a while, and I built the PowerPoint that I then presented at halftime of, I think, a preseason game for the Panthers. So, I mean, not only are the Panthers not doing great, but then you throw preseason, no one really cares. So during halftime or such, I presented it to them and gave them the idea. And it was the high-level concept that I had come up with that I had initially shared with Chris. That was in August of 2021.
Okay.
So the idea probably came either early 21 or late 2020. Probably when we were all stuck inside for COVID. And I was thinking, man, when I can get back out there and listen to music, like, wouldn't it be great if I could find out where to go? So, that's kind of a ballpark of that time frame. But we officially incorporated in November 2022 and then began onboarding folks in early 23. So it's been this 3 to 4 year period of the idea to kind of where we are now.
So when you started Earshot, all the things that you want to incorporate in Earshot, why did you start with musicians? Why did you start with the music aspect of it?
Honestly, again, it's kind of this cross between like what my passion is. Like I can connect with music. I just love it so much.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge foodie. I appreciate it. My wife is way more kind of into, hey, let's try this new restaurant. And, we got to try the pierogies here. I looked them up beforehand. And there's so many other kind of elements, but I really connected with music. And honestly, I think of all of the events, I know food trucks are really continuing to surge. And I'm very happy that games are continuing to surge as well on a weekly basis, trivia here.
Right.
But I feel like music has always been there. Live music has always been there kind of in the community. Whether you're, windows down in summer and you came back from picking up some food and you hear at your local restaurant or pub, you hear some music playing, within earshot, there's something going on. I need to go over there and check it out.
Yeah.
I feel like music has always been there. So we thought that it was a very sturdy industry to be able to start with that, again, we can talk to a ton of people. We don't talk to everybody in the community because music is everywhere. There are, an infinite amount of musicians with different styles. And we really believe that there is so much variety in musicians, their genres, their preferences, and where they perform and how they kind of set up, that would really be a great base to get that variety to be able to build the most kind of comprehensive solution for what on the back end is effectively kind of very tedious manual booking processes.
Right.
In order to kind of get events going at places.
So you've got musicians on there now. How many musicians are we talking about that have created profiles like myself?
Yeah, so I checked this morning. We have 65 musicians
that
are on there, and they all operate on Earshot in a variety of ways.
Yes.
I do want to give a shout out to M143, our first user, connected with them on Instagram, and was very excited about the idea once I shared it, and has since continued to perform and add their events to Earshot. So I did want to give that little plug there because again it does take a lot for the first person to if no one else is on there and you're the first an early adopter, let me just take a shot and see are these guys for real? What do they have going on? So that was the first, and that was in early 2023, and now we're up to 65. So that's continuing to grow. But again, they're all using it in a different way. Some folks are religiously adding all of their shows, and they may have huge volume. We talked about Val being one of them. She is an absolute super user on Earshot. And I think has probably posted over 100 of her own shows on there. And then some folks, created a profile and said, I actually have 2 jobs. This is like my side gig. I'll re-enter the space and maybe I do a gig once a quarter and I'll add it there. Sure. Or I'm going to wait until some hosts are on there. So they all use it in a variety of ways. But we have 65 musicians that are on there. And then we also have one games company on there, Mindless Minutia. Jacob is awesome to work with, super enthusiastic guy, gave us some great ideas for how to incorporate games in, and then in talks with some other user bases like food trucks to get them on initially.
Okay. When you're doing it, you want to connect the musician with the venue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're still you're still building the platform
Yeah.
a bit. It's not like fully realized yet. Because of course, you're putting it out there. You got to get people. You got to get everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any chance to get some venues or hosts to join into the Earshot family?
Not yet. And, where we initially started with this, we thought, well, if we can get one host, and that's kind of the term we use for venues,
right?
Because they're hosting these events. Venues, that might have that connotation of, oh, it is like the neighborhood theater, or it's Red Rocks, like it's a proper venue, right? But again, the essence of venue absolutely works. We shifted to host because they're hosting all these events. So we started, again, when we were trying to work out this idea, talked to a ton of musicians, friends that we knew, and strangers that we would reach out to, that we ran into, but also a ton of hosts as well, talking to bar managers that happen to be the event coordinators, or, while we're out having a drink, or just honestly dropping by, hey, can I talk to your manager and see kind of what their perspective is?
Yeah.
We talked to a ton. He's out, Chris is out in Franklin, Tennessee, right outside Nashville. And so we had some conversations there, and they have given us a ton of great feedback from their end on what problems do they encounter. So once we got the technology spun up in early 23, our initial thought was, well, let's go connect with new hosts and see if we can get them on board. If we can get one or two on board, then they will bring on the talent that they have coming in the coming months onto Earshot as well, so that booking can happen, and then we'll be gravy, and it'll all excel from there. What we found was, hosts are running an incredibly complex business. They have to worry about inventory of food or drink and staff. They can be upwards 10 plus staff.
Sure.
And they have a ton of stuff on their plate, right? So where we found success bringing musicians on, again, this is their passion, whether it's their full-time job or whether it's on the side, music is their passion. And any way they can streamline kind of the back-end processes to be able to go execute their passion out in the community, there was much more enthusiasm from them to say, like, I'll take a chance on this. Like, why not?
Right.
Just set up a profile and log some stuff. But with hosts, we found it harder to do that because they're juggling all these things. So I really have time to start this new platform and take a chance on it. Like, it's brand new. Let me just wait until someone else is on there. We don't even see any musicians on here that we'd be able to connect with. So honestly, that was probably, and again, it's just a learning opportunity where our assumption was, we bring on a venue, or a venue at the time, now hosts, and we'll be cooking once we can show that value. But we recognize that a need for them is they kind of need to see that value immediately and be able to operate immediately. Yeah. Right? Because again, they're trying to do so many other things. So we haven't reconnected with hosts. Mm-hmm. We shifted what our phase one was going to be. One or two hosts to be able to get started and then kind of drive that momentum. We're still in phase one of creating our creator base. So when I say creator, that includes musicians, food trucks. It could be fitness instructors, right, for yoga or run clubs that are at different venues, games and so on. So those are the creators. We're really building out that creator base, especially when we first pitched to host. It was really just musicians. One of the great feedback we got was from Bloom and Bottle, which is in kind of that Belmont neighborhood in kind of northeast Charlotte near Noda. And we had said, hey, we see that you have musicians that are playing on a weekly basis. Is this something you'd be interested in? They're like, no, actually, we're kind of humming on how we coordinate with them and book them and honestly advertise for them. But man, if you could figure out how to get food trucks here, that would be great. They're a bottle shop. They don't do any food. They do florals and stuff. So that's part of our business that we really can't figure out. How do we consistently and easily book them there? Right. So that is one of the main feedback. We then said, okay, let's shift from just music to events. Mm-hmm. As a consumer, as I said, I personally, selfishly would want to know where can I listen to music and get some food at a brewery or whatever. So we're building that creator base. So when we go back and re-engage those hosts in what would be our phase two, they can now say, look, we have no problem with music. And maybe they do, and they might realize later, Earshot does have kind of that booking process to offer to streamline it. or they really don't have any issues with music, with booking music, but we do have issues, booking these other things. Maybe we want to try a karaoke night. We wouldn't know how to go out about and book that. So that's kind of our phase 2. We don't have any hosts on there yet. But once we, again, build out that creator base and kind of massage out what, because we initially built it for what does a musician profile look like, that is very different than what a games profile looks like or a food truck. You're now listing cuisine, not music genres, right?
Right. Well, you got to have the creators there, the food trucks or the musicians, to say, hey, we have this base of people, do you want to host some of those people?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we were talking a bit before we started recording, and one of the issues that I've run into as a musician, and I know a ton of musicians who have the same issue, is getting booked someplace, being booked regularly, and then all of a sudden management changes over, a new manager comes in. That new manager might not have access to all the paperwork or information for the musicians that the old manager had. So all of a sudden you're trying to get booked again at a place that you've been playing for a year, 2 years, and you are on radio silence with them. You can't get in touch with them. And then you finally show up and you're like, hey, Susie had booked me such and such and such. And they're like, yeah, well, we have a new manager now and Susie's not here anymore. So
right.
She's got her own musicians, and you're like, I just had this relationship with the restaurant, not even just with the management. I was here and regularly and such, and it becomes a problem. And I think Earshot would be a great platform for those hosts to come in and say, hey, I have all this information already at my fingertips. We've booked such and such musicians out, and now I know how to get in touch with them in case a new manager comes in.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. That is one of the main pain points that we're trying to tackle with this. That's a ton of feedback. We received that same feedback, examples from various artists, musicians that we had spoken with. That exact problem. They show up Saturday morning, they realize Jessica doesn't work there, and there's another musician setting up in their spot.
Yeah.
Right? And they'd already been booked three months before. And again, that is because we believe that the process of booking is not tuned in enough to be able to make managing those bookings easier for the host. Right. We're trying to honestly give everyone the benefit of the doubt. We are not necessarily trying to place blame and say, the real crux of this process is this. And if we just fix these folks, right? They have their own challenges that they may not have a technology out there to solve that problem.
Right. Well, I'm not blaming managers
at
all.
Of course.
Or restaurants at all.
Of course.
What I am saying is that I know, having been in the restaurant business for a bit, how busy they are.
Yeah.
They're busy ordering food. They're busy managing staff. They're busy with customers and social media now. How are we promoting events? Almost sometimes the last thing on their mind are the musicians.
Right, because they're not on their payroll, right? Again, they are paying them, but that they do have so many other priorities. And what are some ways, if there's a different environment for booking and for events, what other ways can we kind of shore that up so that as there's change, and change happens everywhere all the time. Yeah, folks leave under whatever circumstance it may be, and things do slip through the cracks. But it's really difficult on multiple fronts when a situation like that slips through the cracks and it affects a musician that had driven an hour to go play there. I mean, folks travel, to different states to go play. We had a couple of examples, as Earshot had ramped up, where folks had driven 4 hours for a gig, and that kind of thing had happened where it turns out that they had to cancel it for kind of mismanagement reasons. And again, mismanagement is giving them the benefit of the doubt for whatever reason that may have been. So, that is certainly a shame in the scenario that will happen for musicians, but also it is a bummer for the staff and for the business itself that they now unfortunately become kind of unreliable in that space a little bit. Yeah. I don't know, Matt, if how you feel about this and in Charlotte or maybe kind of the subsections of Charlotte, but what I've experienced and heard from a ton of folks is Charlotte is a pretty communicative and in certain areas and genres, tight-knit community where folks will talk to each other. Yeah. Different coordinators will talk between different locations. Oh, man, this guy played at our place and, ended up kind of yelling at some customers, like probably not a good look.
Wouldn't be the first time I've heard it.
Right. Don't book with this person. Or it could be on the other end of musicians, talking with other musicians, like kind of got, the bad end of a deal with this group. They had promised one thing, delivered another. I don't think I'm going to play there. Just want to give you a heads up in case they ever reach out to you or you were thinking about playing there. So, that can certainly, those situations, again, just in something falling through the cracks, not necessarily anyone's fault. That can hurt reputations and kind of just credibility moving forward. Where if someplace, maybe for a sustained 5 years, was known in their neighborhood or in their location, that we're going to provide good quality, awesome music with a great vibe and great food, whatever else they provide. But it can very easily break down if someone leaves under whatever circumstances and they have a string of 6 months where all the stuff that they book is lost and all these musicians, maybe they had a ton of variety of musicians and now none of those musicians want to work with them again. Now they might have a problem ramping back up their live music.
Right.
Now their community who banked on showing up on Fridays to go listen to music, well, now they lost their whole schedule and they are flailing to try and book folks for what is advertised as live music on Friday nights. And over time, that community remembers because they're reliably trying to show up and say, man, this place is great.
Yeah.
I want to hear live music. I bring my whole family. We show up. There's nothing going on. It's a ghost town. So I'm not going to go here next Friday. I'll just go to the next place. So, there are a lot of, there's a lot of fallout in that. And again, Earshot can certainly, Earshot moves to solve those problems. Like that's one of the problems we're built to do. So the way that we do that is currently a musician, a creator, is working with one or two individuals at a hosting place, brewery, restaurant, whatever that may be, whether it's the owner who's really jazzed about music or it's a live music coordinator. You're really working with that person one-on-one. And from our experience, we've heard that person really kind of just runs the show in how they're going to organize it. They may store in an Excel tracker, and maybe it's super sophisticated, on their own hard drive that they then take right out the door if they find a new opportunity or they're let go, and they don't necessarily share it with anybody else.
Yeah.
With Earshot, because this is all profile driven, creators have profiles, hosts have profiles, that's all tied to the business itself. So it's not tied to an individual. So that's now stored within the Earshot database so that if, again, I'll use this name for no reason, if Jessica decides, hey, I got a new opportunity, now it's not going with her computer. Now, unnamed brewery can now bring in Jeff, and Jeff's going to manage the music, and it's all still there for them tied to that Earshot profile.
Right.
So they'll still have that accessible to be able to pick right back up instead of now doing double work to double book musicians because they were not aware of a music schedule.
Well, the other thing that's good that I like is that once you have all the creators there, or musicians, as it were, you can also see who's been playing where, and restaurant, brewery, bar owners, what have you, they won't have to think about who to hire. Because the thing I've heard from many restaurants or managers has been, oh, we've had people in and they weren't what they promoted.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know. They're not judges of music.
Right.
They're not artists. They don't know how somebody's supposed to sing or play or what a normal performance is supposed to be like or how people are supposed to act for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody comes in and they find out, oh, this person didn't really gel with my age range of people that I have here. Somebody might be coming in and our age range is relatively young for our brewery. We normally have people in their, early 20s to 30s. And this genre of music goes over well here. That's kind of what we promote. We don't want 60s. We need
Right.
90s music because that's the age range we promote here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing. It would help them connect better with the artists who do that style of music.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Because right now, from the folks who we talk to, it is a lot of cold calling, and I'll use that as a catch-all.
Cold calling for the managers or for musicians?
For the musicians to cold call to the hosts, right? And maybe back in the day, you drop off CDs, right?
Yep.
No one has a CD player,
Yep.
maybe in their car. or you drop off business cards, or again, you would go in person to talk to somebody. Maybe you would, in fact, like call the actual hosts themselves.
Right.
That's incredibly tedious. And again, what we've heard is that that takes up a lot of time or a lot of dead end. Maybe you just don't get in touch with the right person. Maybe the person that's answering the calls is the bar manager, but the bar manager isn't the person that's booking it. Maybe it is in fact the owner, or maybe it's some bartender that is a music aficionado that is managing it. So, the cold calling piece is tough, but that's a reality of it. So we have elements in Earshot that solve for that. We call them pitches. Mm-hmm. So as a creator, you can pitch to a host and say, I'm interested in working with you in the future. Right? And it's not tied to a specific event day. It's just saying, hey, I'm here. Go and check out my profile. You can see all of my content links, whether it's linked to YouTube, your website, whatever, because creators have a variety of stuff out there that they have to maintain. But again, that it allows them to kind of get their voice and their brand out there in whatever method they want. We're not trying to pigeonhole that within Earshot. Just link conveniently all of their stuff to be able to vet whoever is pitching to them. Yeah. And then hosts will be able to, again, vet that profile. So on the profile, you have a profile picture, of course, and you can add additional photos. Like I said, you have content links to wherever your music is stored, or, maybe it's a rundown of the games as a games host that you provide, your calendar of what you have coming up to be able to see, what's this person's availability? Like they pitched me, they're interested. Right. Let me move forward with potentially booking with them. You can see their previous shows and say, they say that their genre is this. So that really kind of fits our vibe. They play at these other locations. And again, you can say the personnel that show up at these different places are very similar to ours. I think that they would fit very well. You can see, again, how frequently they're playing, and also ratings. What is their rating as a musician from other hosts? And again, keep in mind, as we're in phase one creating that creator base, this is all built into the platform, but you won't see that data yet because we don't have any official bookings going within Earshot. When folks are adding their shows, that's stuff that's booked through these manual mediums. So in this phase one, as Matt, you're building out your profile, or your profile's built, but you continue to add your upcoming shows, that's now going to show in your previous shows list or your previous events list that now if you pitch to a host, they can go see Matt has played at all these places. Right. Again, the reviews come in once hosts start booking with creators through the platform. You're going to rate each other because, again, that's good transparency, accountability to make sure everyone's a good faith partner in this that you can review. Didn't really get the deal that I thought I was. This musician did not sound the way that they advertised.
Did they show up on time?
Right. Did they show up on time? Did they leave early? They took a 2-hour break and a 3-hour set. So that's kind of how all that fits together. But you're right. We wanted to. Transparency is the name of the game. I mean, people can brand themselves, however well that they can. But with Earshot, not only is it what you kind of put together in your profile, but it's also validated by the actual bookings that you post or the bookings that you're booked with active users and reviews. So you get a holistic view of who am I working with.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, I mean, there's no hosts on the website quite yet. Yeah. We're still figuring that out. Yeah. But with reviews, is the plan for that to be quote unquote public so everybody could see that? No. Or is that the kind of thing that would be really just select, I'm a host, the only people who can see it are hosts so that they can see? Because if a host has a bad experience with someone or the musician has a bad experience with someone, you don't necessarily want to make that public. I know musicians sometimes that'll be a back channel thing if they had a bad experience with somebody. But there are also musicians who, right or wrong, you can look at it any way you like, they will publicly on Facebook name names.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not me.
Right.
But I have seen and heard musicians, they will do rants on Facebook about venues.
I've seen those too.
I don't think it's necessarily right. That's not my thing.
Right.
And
everyone runs their business different, right?
Yes.
And it's, that may be for someone who's very passionate about it. And maybe there was some circumstance that really did kind of rub them the wrong way or put them in a bad situation. And maybe others, look, I'll take one on the chin. That's fine. But I want to run my business this way and really kind of present it forward. So I think that's a great question. And we had actually been asked by some musicians who would prefer hey, can we share those reviews? Like, not only can those reviews be public, right? So that people know that I'm a good faith partner and want to support me, but also can we have community reviews of me performing there? And there's a lot of risk with the latter one. People can just be mean for no reason.
Yeah.
Right. So we're certainly not going to tread in that area. Again, I could see the benefit, but, and maybe there's a future for it, but let's kind of take that in another channel. We don't really want to build that out yet.
Right.
Because anyone could write anything. Don't want to be in that business.
Sure.
Right. But you're absolutely right that it is solely for the creators and the hosts to see each other. It does not need to be public by any means, because you do want business to be in-house. I know that people take feedback differently, but it's very possible that one of the folks on one end, the host end or the musician end, may not be aware of kind of how they are interacting with their partner in that business transaction. And you want that feedback to be unfiltered so that they can learn from it if that's in fact kind of how they want to run their business and they want to get better.
Sure.
Right? So, we're still mulling the idea of exactly what is visible to everybody within the user group base.
Right.
So talking about hosts versus creators.
Right.
Again, community's not going to see it. Where we are right now, and this might change based on feedback, how it initially rolls out, is it's a 5-star review. And then you tag what elements they did well within that. They're just very generic tags. So It's very similar if you look at Uber, of a great communicator, a smooth driver, very friendly, clean car. Make those boilerplates like higher level and available to everybody. But those comments of exactly what it is probably should be kept behind the wall just between those two partners so that, again, those details can be borne out in there.
Yeah.
But that really is just kind of behind closed doors. So again, let's say someone gets 2 stars. You'll have the opportunity to say, like, timeliness was an issue. Maybe you don't have the exact details of that. Right. But that is enough for you to be able to kind of understand, like, okay, maybe that means up front I need to be very explicit about timeliness. I'm willing to take a little bit more of a risk and all that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, and we firmly believe, we understand in low volume, data gets really squirrely where it may misrepresent early. So if you have 5 data points and you have 1 bad review, well, yeah, like 1 out of 5, maybe that's not great.
Yeah.
But in aggregate over time, we believe that that's really going to bring forward kind of the true nature of who that person is and how they run their business in volume. So we also are planning on, again, once this all ramps up, have a minimum review count before reviews are actually visible. We believe that number should be anywhere between 5 and 15 to 20 reviews before that happens. You don't actually get to see a review number on that person. We really need to establish a trend with that. So, whether there's feedback, now or in the future, we're still trying to work with folks to figure out what the best way to do that is. Again, you're trying to toe this line of transparency of everything versus, and have everyone see everything versus, like, do we really want the dirty laundry out for everybody?
Yeah. Well, in a way, reviews can be really good. They can be helpful to the artist or performer, and they can also be helpful to the restaurant or the place that you're playing. For example, hey, Jack showed up today to play, and he was dressed in a tank top and shorts and flip-flops, and we're an upscale place.
Right.
And it didn't fit our vibe that they came, just to play like that.
Yeah.
We understand it's warm and it's outside on a patio, but, we're a 5-star restaurant, and that's not the vibe we want to give.
Right.
And that person could say, oh, maybe, I'm just starting out. Maybe next time I don't show up like that to this particular place.
Absolutely.
Maybe the artist says, or the musician says, hey, I came to play and I had to wait a half hour for them to clear out the area that I'm supposed to play in. And they expected me to play an extra half hour because I had to wait for them.
Right. Which is not good business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it gives both sides, I think, a viable insight into what the other's expectation is. And that can be a good thing. But we also know that doing reviews people's feelings get hurt real easy.
Yes.
Real easy.
Yes, they can. And at that point, looking at reviews, you don't know the temperament of the person that wrote it, maybe what state they were in.
Yep.
Maybe they really lashed out and they didn't feel that way. So I do think that while an incredibly important aspect of it, so that folks can know what they're working with beforehand, it does need to be handled with tact and really kind of in a methodical, meaningful way. So we will continue to kind of build out what that looks like. I love what you talked about in terms of just setting expectations, because as a part of our intentional design, it's like, do we really want to wait necessarily till the end of a gig to find out what the unset expectation was? I don't think that we should. Like,
right.
let's set up everybody with all the information that they might need beforehand. So the way that we tackle that is a host has, and also, each user base is going to have a manage my element. Whether it's manage my musician, manage my host, right? Where you will be able to input some critical information, repeatable information that's standardized, that'll be available to the folks that you're working with. So for instance, if that host says, we have a dress code, we would like for this vibe to be maintained. We also have a setup routine that takes about 45 minutes. And this is maybe the person that you're going to coordinate with. Instead of them having to type that out every single time in some coordination email or in an Instagram communication to ramp up to the event coming up this week, let's just have that information stored. Boiler point. What are the instructions? What are the expectations up front? And you can see that before you accept a gig and be like, look, I played Jimmy Buffett. I like to play in my tank top and my Hawaiian shirt. That's a part of my vibe. And I really don't want to dress up for this. So, knowing that up front, now I have all the information I need up front to say, this is not for me. And good. We shouldn't have to go through this exercise of figuring out, we both did not work well together. So maybe we shouldn't have done this in the first place.
I tell you, one of the things, talking to you for a bit and using the Earshot platform myself, is it's interesting that the plane is getting built in the air.
Yeah.
Like, you have it, you have an idea, but the thing is that you're willing to change and adopt new aspects to the platform as new information comes in. Because we sat and talked before we started recording, and you're like, man, do you have any insights about, things that you'd like to see? And I told you, and you're like, man, that's a good idea. We didn't think about that. Let's go back and change. So as you get more insight from the creatives, and hopefully hosts when they come in, the things that they need, then it'll become a ever evolving platform where you're able to change this and change that. And it's not like, we set up Earshot, we're very rigid. No. We're not changing anything, man. This is the way it is. When you are open to the changes, then the platform can evolve and it can really start to take off, because as you start to move forward and have more creatives, more partners, as you talked about, and even add hosts onto it, it starts to become a real thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I think that there's a lot of goodwill that we have been able to build with the folks that we've partnered with, early musicians, or again, getting feedback from live coordinators,
right?
At hosts, by being very open-minded to it. I'm not a proud man. I will admit when I'm wrong. I actually think that, that makes me better. I like the idea of being able to be nimble and adjust.
Yeah.
Because, we're all figuring life out. While I may have had a good initial idea of how I thought it worked, that was built on a ton of assumptions.
Yeah.
And as we talked to more folks, again, you gave great ideas. And I'm like, I wrote down in my phone, like, these are things that I could implement this week, because we are built very nimbly in our current build, is to be able to adjust. And I just think in my profession, in my personal life, if you do all of this build up front and then you say, all right, well, I poured in hundreds of hours to this.
Yeah.
And I'm right. And I'm amazing. So I'm not going to change anything at all. Even as I get new information, let me now force these folks that I'm trying to partner with into a box that I built without their input. That just doesn't seem, honestly, like a recipe for success.
Right.
I've learned so much through the process of just talking to people, honestly, getting their feedback, getting their pain points, that half of the stuff in there, more than half, I never would have dreamt up myself. So I feel like this kind of has to happen because we're trying to build this kind of all-inclusive this is an entire industry that has so much variety that even if you wanted to be a genius and tackle all of that without coordinating with people and making adjustments, it just isn't feasible. So, while I do say, I guess I'm not a proud man, I am proud of the fact that at Earshot, Chris and I have really made that a consistent part of our internal reflection of we may have thought that this was the way, and let's now make an adjustment because people are going to want it. Yeah. And man, the goodwill that you get when you're able to follow back with somebody 2 weeks later and say, we heard you. We think what you said was incredibly valid. And even if it's just you, we know that there are other people, even if it's just you that had said it, we know that there are a ton of people out there that it'll affect either now or in the future once this continues to grow. We implement it for you. So now you can see it. Now you can actually test it. And if that now makes it easier as you're marketing your show or you're trying to coordinate for future events, that this small thing that, again, may have taken an hour to build or maybe a week to build, if it's providing even value to just you, that feels great. And you are more likely to continue to give us feedback because now you can see that the feedback isn't just going into a black hole.
Yeah.
That stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
In business with folks that you love, you're giving feedback to a buddy like, hey man, like I wish that you would do this more often to make me feel better, when we're hanging out, not hurt my feelings or whatever the case may be. And they just don't do it. And you're like, okay, well, I guess you really don't care how I feel about it. So I do think that generates a lot of goodwill, and I'm very pleased. It has continued to pay off dividends for just a better platform and a better experience. To be nimble and want to build a platform for you all. Instead of like, I'm this visionary, I have it all figured out, this is my platform and y'all are going to fit into it. Again, this is built for the community. So this is for you guys.
Yeah, I think the interesting part about it is to relate it to politics. You've got politicians and they get slammed for quote unquote waffling. And I think the problem that they have, much like you're talking about, is they're not willing to come and say, I got new information which changed my mind.
Right.
I decided that this issue thing thought of this way is not what it currently is now.
Yeah.
The situation has changed. New information came in. The world has changed. So I had to change my point of view, which to you in your business is, hey, I talked to another musician and I talked to a few other musicians, and they gave me new information and feedback, and how I need to apply that makes a lot of sense. So they see a need for this. And if I can cover that need and do it this way, that just helps me grow my business. Because if it's one musician I talk to, there's probably 4 other musicians who had that same thought who didn't even think about telling me about that.
That's exactly right. Because they may have been focused on, maybe that's pain point number 3. And they communicated 1 and 2, but there are just so many out there that they can't bring up everything. They don't want to feel necessarily like they're burdening us, right? Because we're trying to build something for them. So I think that's exactly right. Now, with politics, they're playing in such a sandbox. Gosh, I would never want to be in, where in a way it can be a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. Where on our end, it's just as long as we can put ego aside. And we're really doing it for the right reasons, then making adjustments, man, that is the absolute best thing. But you're right. New information is always going to come in. Who knows? The live music scene in Charlotte might change in 2 years.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to be nimble and move to adjust. Now, what I will say is the way that we're set up, because it is just myself and Chris, and, this is not a knock, by the way, on anybody that builds their business this way, because we are in kind of a unique space to be able to operate in the way that we are, but we did not need to go out and chase investment. We didn't need, because of the tools at our disposal.
Right.
We didn't need to go out and have all of these externalities now weigh on our decision making. So what's great is we might have an agenda for our weekly meeting and say, all right, we need to tackle this. This is something on our plate. But if something important comes up, we learned something new this week. Let's talk about that first. Let's see the cross section between what our current vision is and how we're going to, execute certain objectives, and see if there's something we need to adjust before we go all in on this thing. It has happened several times where we worked on an item one week, we reassessed it the next and said, oof, I actually don't think we did that correctly. We need this new information, we need to go to explore.
Yeah.
That's going to inform how we're actually going to do, for example, reviews.
Yeah.
And then we end up kind of getting to that location. So we are in a unique position to be able to do it that way. We want to operate in that space of just us, being able to really make our own decisions without all those externalities as long as we can, until volume is what's killing us. And that's great.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a great problem to have.
And to be clear, you guys are in phase 1.
Mm-hmm.
You are not, I'm in phase 5. No, we're in the building stages right now, which is part of the reason that you're willing to take on new information and change and adapt and make it what it needs to be for creators. And there probably will reach a situation or a point when you've pretty much got it tuned in to those creatives, and then all of a sudden when you get new things like the game crew coming in, you're going to have to tweak things just for them a certain way to find out what works for them. And then when a host comes in, you'll have to tweak it for them. So, but I do like the underlying theme of it all is that once you get everybody to join, you've got your creatives, you've got your hosts, you got everything, you can point to everything and say, hey, this host, I'll use one of my lovely venues that I play at, Lower Left, because I love them.
Oh, yeah.
Lower Left is having a food truck. Boom. And then we've got Matthew's playing tonight. Boom. Wow, we've got a triple threat. We're at the brewery tonight. They got a food truck, and we got live music.
Mm-hmm.
What else could we want?
Right. And honestly, that was probably our biggest pivot, was saying we're going to move from just musicians to events, because that opened up a whole can of worms of, man, we got to do a lot of discovery.
Yeah.
I know nothing about food trucks at this point, so let me go learn all of this. But there is such a joy in going out and learning that. The evolution of this thing, we have kind of gone through phases. Ideation, really kind of dreaming at that point. Mm-hmm. Then you're really putting pen to paper of what are your business ideas, like actually writing it down, not just talking. Yeah. Then building the platform, then interfacing with folks. But I find so much joy in the discovery of it because, first of all, you're connecting with people. Man, that's one of my favorite things to do, is to actually go out and connect people. And then it's also, again, to break down these assumptions for what will be a better product in the future. Yeah. So, that shift to events, while it was certainly a huge shift and in some ways really uprooted what we had already built, again, we recognize, hey, that is the future for Earshot. It is a worthwhile investment, not to dig our heels in and say, well, we said we were going to be launching phase 2 with hosts in July, and man, do we have to stick to that? No, we don't. We're our own bosses. So if we both see that is the vision and it's going to set us up in the future way better, let's do that now. Yeah. Let's do that now. Because otherwise, if you create a machine that's humming in just the music space and you decide, well, now we're going to do events. Well, now you have potentially 200 users in there, and every move you make is incredibly impactful. Right. Maybe you gotta take it down for a day, but that might actually impact across 200 users using it. That may be huge. So make all the changes that we need to make now, the updates that we need to make now as well, so that when we get to that phase 2, we are much closer to where we need to be.
And what exactly is phase 2? What's involved in that?
So phase 2 is bringing on the hosts.
Okay.
Right? So phase 1 is that creator, building the creator base, having creators that are, again, operating in their own capacity in Earshot, however they want to run their business as a full-fledged, as a side business. As we talked, there are several other mediums for how musicians will input their upcoming shows, whether it's on their own site or whether it's through other mediums, to market to the community, to market to hosts, for them to be able to see kind of what they have going on. So we recognize that there's going to be a variety of volume of how people, I guess, interact with Earshot. Maybe someone visits it once a week. Yeah. Maybe someone created a profile and hasn't really revisited. Totally cool. We're not going to knock down your door because you have a profile and you're not using it, right? But we want to create that solid creator base so that when we get to phase 2, now we have built in, the main 3 that we're focusing on: musicians, we have that pretty ironed out. Games, we have one massive, amazing user in Mindless Minutia for games. Again, with 60 kind of recurring, 60-something or 60-ish recurring games a week here in Charlotte and the surrounding area. I think they also have games in Asheville, too. And then food trucks. So those are the main three creator bases where we want to have a solid base of users that are on there that when hosts come on, they can immediately start booking in phase 2.
Okay.
So in phase 2, where that starts is we identify the hosts. There are probably a variety of ways to do this, but let's go ahead and start with the hosts where the creators that are on there have posted as playing there so that we can go back to Untamed Waters or to Bloom and Bottle or to Lower Left and say, Lower Left, you have had, James Delco and, Matt and all these other people that are on Earshot. Let's see if we can get you plugged in. And now they can say, oh, great. Like, we want to book Matt for 2 weeks and we want to do a food truck. Are there food trucks on here? Oh, cool. They have an Italian place. I don't know if there are Italian food trucks,
sure.
right?
Oh, yeah, there are.
Okay, right. There's a food truck for everything,
yeah.
right? So at least have that creator base so that they can hit the ground running. So that's phase 2.
Okay. So if you don't mind me asking, since it is a business, like I know as a musician and a creative, it's free to me to sign up. So if you're a musician in Charlotte and you haven't checked out Earshot, go sign up, get yourself a profile and start helping promote it. Because one of the things that I do love about Earshot is you guys promote it. You're not just an app to connect people or set up a thing. When I go, I can see you guys send stuff out and you say, hey, this is what's going on this week or this weekend or today. And I can then link it up on my Instagram and I can share it on my story so I can share what's going on, in the music community and what I'm doing. But it's a business. So what's the ultimate goal? How are you guys going to make money in this in the end? Is it the end goal at one point, once you've got hosts coming in and you've got creatives, is it to be able to charge a fee to the hosts to connect them with the artists?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And this has evolved over time where, we weighed the idea of, and this is, this is like SeatGeek stuff, where it's in each transaction, you're going to play a role in that. You're going to facilitate the transaction and then you're going to take a fee. There are also subscriptions and there are probably some other ways where you have packages of bookings and say like, okay, I want to buy 5 bookings as a host. Yeah. It's going to cost this much to be able to execute 5, and then I'll go back and buy more packages. So as we were really thinking through that, let's just take the transaction approach where you skim off the top. We believe that we're very intentional in kind of talking through kind of why would we do this? What are the impacts of this? What are some circumstances that we really kind of need to consider to see if this is actually the right approach? So if you were to take that skim off the top approach, which again, there's nothing wrong with doing that in other businesses. Well, let's say that Matt charges a different rate based on the quality, based on the time that you put in to your gig and your show that you put on versus another musician. So Matt's going rate might be $400 and this other musician may be $100. Well, what skimming off the top does is it just takes a percentage. Right? So not only would we be inserting ourselves in the actual transaction between hosts and musicians, which by the way, like legally, that is not something we want to do. We do not want to be involved in every single transaction. So if something goes wrong, something needs to be disputed. Yeah. We don't have to carry the money from one party to another, right? It's already existing where it's cash or it's check or it's a Zelle, whatever. Right. Keep running your business how you want to run it. We don't need to be in that. But if you were to do the skim off the top piece, then we're making more money off of you, Matt, charging $400 than the musician charging $100. Well, why in the world should you take less money for the time and effort and the quality you put into your craft? Why should you be giving more money to us than the person charging $100? It's not like we gave you any more value than the person with $100. So that doesn't really make sense to us at all. Like that doesn't seem fair. We are a tool and a platform providing equal value to anybody that wants to utilize it however they want to utilize it. So we got off of that transactional from that multiple reasons of being involved in every transaction and also, again, the percentage and the unfairness of that, we believed. And we've now moved to a subscription model. But recognizing, and this was through, I think, really great feedback from musicians. Hey, this is our idea. Let's talk about it further. Now we have a platform. We can show it to you. What's your idea of a subscription on this? And some folks are saying, look, I play once a month. And again, that's based on what I have going on. I'm not really necessarily trying to have a subscription to this as a musician. I'm really just trying to make some side cash.
Right.
Why do I need to do that? Also talked to a couple of other buddies that have side businesses of their own to try and understand how they've kind of done that. It's something, not in the event space, but it's something else that kind of has a similar dynamic. So where we've landed now is where we start off is a subscription for hosts, and creators are free. We want creators on there. That's the bread and butter of events,
right,
is bringing that craft forward. We really don't want a barrier there. Now, the downfall of that is you could have, in the future, and I think it really is just a volume problem. You could have an onslaught of fake profiles or that are not necessarily the quality, and they're lying on their profile of what they can actually produce.
Sure.
Again, that's going to be something that we can tackle in volume. Right now, as we're operating in really great faith and with what our early adopters and advocates of what seem to be Earshot with the musicians we partner with, that's not a problem at all. So we'll address that in the future, but that means we do not need to put on a subscription for any creators in the future. We just want more options out there.
Well, I think that's also one thing. When I signed up for Earshot was I set up a profile, but my profile had to be approved. It wasn't something I could just do right away.
Yeah.
So being that it's a local music app, it's relatively simple to do a little digging on a person. Do they have a website? Do they have a Facebook page? Have they promoted something? Are they on Spotify? Do they have a YouTube channel? So it's relatively easy to play detective and see if people are just a bot or not,
Yes.
It's a fake profile. So, and people in the music community could easily tell. I mean, if it's somebody who's just moved here, fine. But even if you're a musician trying to get out, in the very least, you're going to have a Facebook page dedicated to music or an Instagram page. So something you can at least check to see where it is. So it makes, checking on it relatively easy. If the person's worth their salt as a musician.
Yeah, right.
They've got to have, they're out there in some way or another. There's no anonymity going out and being a local artist. So.
Right. I think that's a great point. And there have been several times as we've grown that user base to 65 where we've brought somebody on and then an existing musician in the network says, oh, I know that person. They're great. And you're like, okay, good. Well, that's easy. That's easily confirmed. But you're right. So, that's how we do it now. And again, it's not like I can't really pump up where we are. We're in phase 1 of this build.
Yeah.
That, again, we're not getting an onslaught of bots. That could happen in the future. We will have solutions for doing that.
Sure.
So fortunately, not something that we're tackling now. But
it's good that you think ahead, and you know that could be a possibility. Although I will say, I mean, and it's my bias, being a musician, I really haven't met too many musicians who are just jerks.
I haven't either.
Most of the musicians, most of the musicians come on the podcast and talk, or even that I meet out, they're really nice folks. It's here in Charlotte, and I've said it to many people, and they've responded the same way. The Charlotte music scene is, although you might not know everybody, it's a pretty close-knit scene, and we tend to weed out jerks. Nobody wants to hang out with them. Nobody likes them. You get that vibe. And if they are jerks, that word gets around.
Oh yeah. I've heard that as well. I have a buddy, David Taylor, who's a part of David Taylor and the Tall Boys. They are an awesome band. And he was actually one of the first musicians that I ran this idea by to say, hey, is this a good idea? And he gave me that exact warning. He's like, look, dude, since you're not in the music scene, let me just tell you, there are Facebook groups dedicated with hundreds of musicians in the Charlotte area that if you don't do this genuinely and in good faith, or you screw people over, word will get around and you'll be done. They will communicate with each other because they are genuine people. They want everyone to succeed. It really doesn't seem cutthroat at all, which I just love. I'm so happy.
That's a very supportive scene.
I'm so happy for that, because honestly, So I mentioned Chris is in Franklin, Tennessee, right outside of Nashville, right? So you're like, Nashville, that is the music capital of the country.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you could say one of several, right? Why don't you start there? That's a great idea. But man, is that a totally different ballgame. I mean, obviously, you know, we're talking about a different level when you're talking about like performing, you know, routinely at, you know, the Jason Aldean bar or whatever, right. or Florida Georgia Line or whatever. You know, not that to say that you don't actually get kind of local people that are able to break through that, right? But that's a completely different scenario that we're talking about. We're talking about professional bookers that are leveraging their relationships that are not going to be open to this kind of platform in their space. Right. Like they have worked up to these different levels to be able to be that gatekeeper for this host and these musicians that just thrown in a platform. They're like, what, are you trying to take over my job? You trying to make it so I'm obsolete? So, you know, again, I know that's a bit of a tangent, but I do think music scene matters. I really do. And the temperament of the folks and how connected they are, I think that matters too. And Charlotte has been I'm not surprised having grown up here, but man, is it a pleasant realization that what I thought our community was, it actually kind of is.
Well, one of the things I really enjoy about Charlotte is I got here about 18 years ago, and I love that I was able to grow with the city. I feel like I moved here at the right time. It was just perfect timing. You know, Charlotte was still relatively small when I moved and got here, and there weren't that many places to play.
Right.
I mean, this wasn't the 70 place brewery scene that it is now, and restaurants and bars and what have you all over Charlotte. It has started to grow, and I was able to grow with the city, so there's more opportunities. And as the scene has grown, so has the music scene, right? More musicians are moving here. And I think you starting this up at this time, it's probably the perfect kind of storm for you guys to move into, because the city's still growing. It's really starting to push a live music scene. There's music like everywhere now. I mean,
yes.
I just played at Gibson Mill Market over the weekend, and I got to meet and see a few of the other artists performing that afternoon. And I'm like, wow, some of these folks I had never even heard of. There's a couple I know, a couple I've heard of. And I'm just like, all right, this is great. You know, this is, and it's a very cool community. I mean, we were all promoting each other on Instagram.
How great is that too?
Yeah.
I mean, really supporting each other. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the kind of community you want. I don't know anything about the Nashville scene other than it's everybody you bump into, whether it's somebody working at the gas station or the waiter waiting tables. Everybody's a musician.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a little bit harder of a scene to start a little business in and promote it. And I think Charlotte is a good place to do that. It's a little more homey of a feel.
Yes.
And it's a little more close knit, so everybody can give you a little bit more feedback.
And I think it has given us and will continue to give us kind of the grace we need as we grow and evolve. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily gonna hammer it hard if we make a mistake and say like, we didn't really do reviews right. Like, let's maybe make an adjustment. You know, again, that is their business over there. Like that is the town's identity. And, you know, when you start challenging someone's identity or trying to make changes to it, make them change. Yeah. There's a lot of like pain that goes along with that. So Charlotte, I completely agree, is this perfect storm of let's go in and capture it. And by capture, you know, let's bring on as many people as possible so that they can utilize this tool and we can learn and grow with them. Have had a pleasant experience with everyone we've talked to, every musician. And again, like there have been musicians that have said, this isn't really my deal. Like I like the idea a lot. I think it'd be cool. I'm not really a technology person, so I'm not going to do it. Or, you know, maybe, hey, I'm going to wait to see kind of how this grows. Like my business right now is really booming. I don't have time to do this. And they come back and they revisit us and then they make a profile. So, you know, I can't thank folks enough that have given us a chance to be able to kind of show what our vision is, to be able to show that we are invested in making the environment easier for them to operate in. Yeah. Really, because we want more events out there, more quality events, and we don't want a lot of heartache and headache to kind of make those events happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm just all for anything that's out here promoting the local scene. I like to give a voice to everybody. Musicians, I like to have businesses on and talk about what they're doing because it makes for a more tight-knit community. I mean, you can come on and say, hey, man, I was on the Queen City Music Podcast. Matt gave me a platform to talk about my business and how I'm helping and working with the local music scene. And that just makes for a better place to live, I think.
I completely agree. And not only a place to live. So, talking long term, obviously, we think every community would benefit from this.
Yeah.
Big or small. It doesn't have to be Charlotte size, right? So when my wife and I travel, let's take Denver, Colorado, for instance. We went a couple years back. Gosh, we went during the polar vortex that had happened. I think it was like negative 20 degrees. So not necessarily strolling around trying to find live music, just trying to stay inside and warm. But one of our favorite things to do, whether it's Denver, Asheville, whatever, is we want to eat the local food and we want to get a real good feel for the community and really just walk around the city streets or the town, whatever it is. And music is a huge part of that. Yeah. That's not to say that if you say, oh, Charlotte's music scene is this, let's check just 3 boxes of 20. Like we know that there's a variety of it. Yeah. But man, does it feel good to stroll up to a new town and you go grab a bite to eat at a very unassuming place, and man, does the food taste great. And then you walk down the road to go grab a beer, a glass of wine, and a local artist is playing. Yeah. When we were in Durham and I was going to go see the Paper Kites, one of my favorite bands ever, at Motorco, we were walking around the town just to kind of get a feel for it. We did eat dinner, and right before the show, before the doors opened, I was like, there's a cool whiskey bar. Let's go in there. And the most amazing musician was playing. She just had the voice of an angel and had such a cool style for all the covers that she was doing. And it completely elevated our evening, even before what was going to be a great concert. Like it was just such an unexpected joy. So if you can plan for that even a little bit better, right? Like we just happened to stumble upon it. Didn't know music was going to be there. But if we're ever traveling for something, I want to get a feel for what this town is. Let me go search what they got going on. Yeah. If you live in Charlotte and you're trying to go to Richmond, Virginia, you're probably not following Richmond, Virginia's Instagram accounts of all the breweries and all their musicians. I mean, you're certainly not. So doing that research ahead of time, again, is a headache. But if you go on to Earshot in that long term, you can say, we're going in 3 weeks. Let me see what they have playing in 3 weeks. Yeah. Because if these bookings are probably happening further out than that, maybe 2 months, 3 months out. So it should be on there, again, in its most ultimate form. So, helping with the Charlotte local community and where you live, allowing you to connect more with your community, which I think everyone really strives for. Maybe we don't have great methods for doing that now. Yeah. In whether you call it divisive times or whether, people are disconnected with their phones or not, let's use some technology to actually kind of connect together with the community, but also to learn more about other communities to give us other perspectives.
So just to clarify, you're launching in Charlotte. Yes. The plan is to try to launch into other cities as well, but you haven't done that yet into other cities.
Have not done that yet. We need to get it right here.
That's great.
We need to get it right in Charlotte. So this is our proving ground, and again, a great place to do it. I'm so passionate about this city. Gosh, same with you. 18 years ago, we would have called it a town when you have just 4 high rises, right? I love this town. It is a huge part of my identity. So I am so happy that I'm here to be able to roll it out here, to have it succeed here. Yeah. And then all of those lessons learned, spread it through the Carolinas. Like, let's have this thing a kind of homegrown thing. There's probably a way that you could do this where you prove it in Charlotte and then you just throw boatloads of money at it. And you're like, let's just spam it across the country, right? And that is certainly one way that you could do it. But man, have we found a ton of success by genuinely just connecting with people in that community. So, road show that around in the Carolinas and say, all right, maybe something worked for Charlotte, but for Greenville, South Carolina, it's a different scene. And maybe we'll learn something there that is going to help grow in other areas in a community that, again, we just didn't have that proving ground in Charlotte, but now we have it in these other areas. So that is certainly the dream, the long-term plan to roll that out.
Well, you're definitely in a good region for it because, you start with Charlotte and then you say, oh, okay, let's go check out Greenville. Or maybe we go up to Raleigh and get the Raleigh scene going on. And you got these nice little cities. Plus, let's go out to the coast. What city has a lot of live music there? Let's check out that what's going on in Charleston.
Oh,
and
yeah.
see if that can promote there, and then somebody can do that. And then you can, somebody can be on the app and say, well, what area am I going to? Charleston. Let's see what's going on in Charleston. And it just switches over to the Charleston scene for you. I think that's a fantastic idea, man.
I'm glad you like it. Yeah, it's, and I will say, like, Charlotte's big enough that I do believe that if we then kind of move to these other cities, like, it does kind of have that weight to it now where maybe it didn't in the past, that, if it proves right in Charlotte, then you can have this kind of more accelerated ramp up because it proved in kind of a larger town. So, like, a Charleston can work. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Not to say that if you started it in a smaller town that it wouldn't necessarily, like, be successful and you couldn't talk to the Charleston folks with that weight. But I do think there's something there with that.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm wishing you guys all the luck. I think it's a great idea. What do you, you probably already realize it, but how do you feel Earshot contributes to the scene of promotion in the city? Because there are other promotions. We talked about it earlier, how there was one of my friends, DZ, who had been on the podcast, and DZ, he was like one of the originators of starting to promote the scene. He would do Facebook posts, and there are other groups, for lack of a better word, they have Instagram, and they help promote the scene as well. Charlotte Live Music, Queen City Live Music. There are other venues that help, I shouldn't say venues, that's a poor term, but platforms, which help promote the local music scene. But the one thing I like about Earshot, and maybe it's just me, is that it's a little bit different in the way you're going to promote it. You're not just saying, here, right in where you're playing, we're going to promote this weekend. We're actually building a profile for the artist with your picture attached to it. How do you feel about your, how you fit into the scene? It's
certainly a unique approach. And honestly, that took a lot of figuring out as well. So, credit to my sisters, older Taylor Lawler, younger Cameron Bureau. They're both in that graphic design space, marketing space, very, very successful in their respective fields. And when I initially started doing promotion, working with Canva templates or, again, some other method for creating an Instagram post, maybe it's just typing on Instagram's create element, I really leaned on them heavily. Like, am I doing this right? I'm a process guy. I am not about design. Right. I'm about function. So please, give me any tips that you can. And they have provided so much insight and feedback and, frankly, templates, or even just teaching me how to do it, that now where we are today is because of them. So, really thank them for answering a 10 o'clock
That's great.
call at the night when my mind is racing and saying, John, well, this is how you could do it. Okay, I'm going to go back to bed. So now we really have a voice of what we want to be on Instagram. And it does need to be, and Instagram is our main method for doing that. Again, because we have two guys, myself and Chris. So we do need to have a method for everything that we do so we can be streamlined. We can do it in a consistent manner. We're not taking 2 hours to create, an Instagram post every day. We've now kind of have a well-oiled machine. Sure. So again, that kind of leads to templates. But we also wanted to kind of bring something different than what's out there. Because to your point, there are these other mediums, I guess, that are promoting. And, we don't want to copy anybody, right? We want to do something different. And we want it to be tied into Earshot, the platform itself. So while we do have these introducings where we're going to showcase kind of a profile, and it's not necessarily a screenshot of the profile. We have a template for it that I think looks really nice, showcases their years of experience or showcases their genres, their name, their photo, what instruments they play. So we have that kind of thing, but we also have kind of a mixed model of what else are we going to share. So on a daily basis, we share what's going on today, and we'll tag all of the different groups for them to be able to repost. And I think that's actually helpful for them. Like the hosts do a wonderful job and man, to the musicians for sure. But I just didn't expect the reaction from hosts as well to, once we tag them in a post, they immediately reshare it so that anybody following their Instagram profiles will see it on their story. Yeah. And that has been huge for gaining more followers, for gaining more, I guess, clicks and insight and people actually seeing when shows are so that they can hopefully show up more. So we now have this routine of doing, again, we have a weekly showcase where we say the upcoming week, let's identify 3. Let's continue to mix and match the different musicians that from what we had the last couple of weeks, and let's see what else is new and what's coming up. And then every day we'll post what's coming on today so that the casual user can look at it and they can say, cool, I actually would love to go to a wine bar tonight with this kind of music. So the strategy for promotion is going to shift because ultimately what we want the community to do is if they're trying to plan out their week or their month, if they're traveling or today, to go on Earshot and actually just look at what's going on today rather than going through Instagram. So that's the long-term goal. So what we imagine, at least what we're doing right now for Charlotte, and I see this honestly happening in every new community release, is that promotion is really heavy up front, like really heavy, where we're doing it every single day. And we're trying to reach the musicians, the hosts, and give them content to share with their followers. And then honestly, the community to be able to see, to be able to go to those events. But as Earshot ramps up in a community, we won't actually need to do that anymore because it's so much better for them to go to Earshot themselves,
right?
To go see the actual event. Because once you click on an event, now you have a copy address component where you're like, oh, this is where this brewery is. Cool, copy it, throw it in, Google Maps, whatever map you use, and let me just go there right now. It has the direct links that we could never link, hey, Matt's playing at 3:00 at this place. We can never link all your content that you have. You need to go to the profile to see if Matt is kind of the person you want to listen to, if that style fits you. We have a save to calendar component for iPhone or for Android. So, there's so much more that Earshot can bring that up front, again, the promotion is to get as many people aware of what's going on in this community and who's involved, and continue to highlight, especially these early adopters that have just been, so kind to what we're doing, like you, to give them recognition. But then as Earshot takes off with hosts coming on board, and then it really, once we get hosts on board, then the community at large is really going to be funneled to that, right? Because the host is now, and again, there's going to be absolutely a free period for hosts before subscriptions kick in. They need to try it. They need to say, hey, I really understand how this works. Is this worth the time? And it will be before we have them pay. But once they're paying for a subscription to streamline their bookings, and now all that stuff's available for the community, they're going to want to promote that and say, we want the people that are showing up to be able to search what our events are. So it's all this kind of self-promoting machine, which is really great. So that's that long-term strategy. But we did want a unique voice, and we believe we've found that in how we vary from the other mediums that promote. It is all pulling from information in Earshot so that, yes, we will craft certain templates to highlight profiles, but we're also just screenshotting, honestly, from what you can find in Earshot yourself on what's happening today or what's happening this week. So we believe we found a pretty good groove with that.
Well, you said it before I did, but it's real interesting the way you put it, but everybody does. Thinking about it, all the other platforms, Queen City Live, Charlotte Music Everywhere, Charlotte Live Music, everybody has their own unique way of just helping to promote the scene, which I think is fantastic. I mean, it's just awesome to have all these folks out there promoting it. And it just builds a better sense of community for not only musicians, but even the hosts, the venues, that have the live music. I mean, it's great that they have other people out there shouting out, what's going on. So
absolutely. Hey, these folks that are passionate about music have our back in the community to, and maybe it is just straight up creating lists or generating lists from what's been input and just sharing that, or it might be curating, like, we think this is the most interesting thing going on and we want to share that with you. So I'm glad you like that. That was important to us. No one's a competitor. Again, we're all in this space. Everyone wants to advance the live music here, right? So how can we make sure that we're different, that we're not stepping on toes? We're not stealing any business from anybody. So I'm glad that resonates with you.
Well, one thing about some of the other platforms is it's not a business. You guys need to be different because you are a business, and at some point you're going to be like, we need to turn a profit. So the other folks, as far as I know, they're just musicians or lovers of music, and they're helping promote it out of the goodness of their heart because they want to see the scene grow. And again, it creates a better sense of community because I'm promoting the scene. The venues are doing their own cross promotion. And then you have the other outlets like Queen City Live Music, and I mention them because they're one of our partners.
Of course.
One of our partners here in town. They help promote too. So you just get this trifecta of things going on, promoting a scene and creating a better sense of community.
Absolutely. So, and I think that we will all grow together. I mean, and I have reached out and had conversations with folks from some of these other outlets.
Yeah.
Just to kind of understand, like, hey, what are you doing? How's it working? Is this a passion? Is this like a business? Like, let's talk about it a little bit and just kind of see where you're at with that. Yeah. And I think that we'll all grow together. Again, Earshot's main focus is to fix the problems, the obstacles, the barriers to events happening more often, quality events, really knowing kind of how to book and who you're booking with.
Yeah.
Right. So promotion, while that helps with ramp up, is really not going to necessarily be like what we're doing. We're providing long term a place for everyone to go look and search and save.
Yeah.
Understand that voice and plan. We're still like, as we grow, I'm sure those other groups will grow, hopefully with us, I would imagine, and use us as a tool and say, I now want to be a curator of these specific genres, or I want to be a curator of like what's going on in these specific neighborhoods. And now we can use Earshot to see everything. Instead of folks having to send us directly, we can now look in Earshot and say, I want to search the Belmont neighborhood. Let me now like promote what's going on in Belmont on Saturday. We really want it to just be this community effort. And we haven't encountered any consternation, any issue, any backlash from anybody, which again, I think means we're on the right track.
Well, it's like I said earlier, it's a very supportive community. Everybody's just doing it because they really enjoy it. They don't want to bring it down. And it just, what's that saying? A rising tide raises all boats, or if I got that correct.
No, that's right.
So it's just a great place to be at a great time, because as it grows, we all can grow within the city. So my only thing is now there's just so many musicians here. It's like, I don't know it. I don't know everybody. And I want to know, I like to know the other people in the community. So.
Well, and this can be a platform for that, right?
Yeah.
Like we recognize that bands happen through connections of individual artists, or it's even, other bands are going to mix together and say, oh, I like what he has going on the bass. Let's see if we can have our own little project going. So, I know that the main connection point, the things we're trying to solve for, primarily are for the bookings and for the events.
Right.
But this becomes an amazing community to be able to research other musicians in your area and say, ooh, like I can maybe tweak a little something going on here and create my own kind of genre that I don't see represented. Or I'm interested in now creating a band and I see these folks out here. I can easily find them, see how reliable they are, how many shows they have. Maybe they got a lot of free time and I want to bring them on for your podcast. Now it can be this whole list of folks that, and again, I'm sure you have your own methods as well. This is maybe another method to find folks that this person's really interesting. Like, let me go sit down and see them play.
Yeah.
After that, let's bring them on. So, I think there's just a ton of value that's not just in that booking process, but also just sewing some social fabric. Again, whether it's around music or it's around food, just around events going on locally, we believe Earshot can bring that value.
That's awesome, man. Hey, John, as we start to wrap things up, how do we get in touch with the folks at Earshot? How do we sign up as a musician? I know you haven't started with phase 2 yet, but how do we get in touch?
Absolutely. So the best way to do that is going to be going to our Instagram, which is earshot.events. So you go on there, and in our bio, you're going to find a link to our site, which you can check out. Mm-hmm. But honestly, I would just point you to the link to the platform itself. So the link is going to be earshot.glide.page. Just double check that and go on to Instagram just in case that ends up changing, right? Because we can always change some slugs on the URL. But the easiest way is to go on there and simply create a profile. Now, as you mentioned, there is a review process. So we'll go ahead and do that, but it's pretty quick and painless, and then we can approve and you can begin posting the shows that you've already booked. And in the future, again, that'll ramp up as we have hosts. Now hosts will reach out to you on there. What I will say too is drop me a line. Like, message me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way to do it because Chris and I run that account. I primarily handle the communication, coordination, and I get a ton of great feedback and connections through there. That's honestly how I connect with folks to either get them to sign up or to just meet them out for coffee and understand kind of what they're dealing with, is by messaging through Instagram. So I would certainly do that. Follow us on there and then message me if you have, even if you're hesitant to have questions. I can certainly, round out any questions you may have, and we can get you started.
Fantastic, man. Well, I wish you guys a lot of success. It's a fantastic platform, so keep going, man.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to episode 71 of the Queen City Music Podcast, and I hope you'll go back and check out past episodes. And if you can be so kind as to leave us a review, I'd greatly appreciate it. You can find the QCMP on all your favorite streaming platforms. As always, if you have an idea for an episode or would like to be a guest on the QCMP, reach out to me at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out our local partners, Records on the Wall at rexonthewall.com. Reporting from 20XX at reportingfrom20xx.wordpress.com. Queen City Live at instagram.com/Queen City Live Music. And Charlotte New Music at charlottenewmusic.org. Until next month, get out there and support your local live music scene by going to check out some of these wonderfully talented artists we have here in Charlotte. Take care.